Welcome. Welcome to the 2021 Candidate Forum for the Office of City Councillor of Ward Odeman. This is an open public forum available to the general public. All candidates running for councillor in this ward have been invited to attend. And I thank the candidates that are here for participating this evening and for putting your names forward for public office. That's a noble thing to do. My name is Matthew Clywitt. I was a candidate myself once, last election in 2017 in the old Ward 7. And you have my respect for what you're doing. And I thought, this would be a fun thing to try from this side. And I'm glad we were able to do this. This forum tonight is brought to you by the Rat Creek Press. The Rat Creek Press is a not-for-profit community newspaper in north central Edmonton that serves the communities of Alberta Avenue, Cromdale, Delton, Eastwood, Elmwood Park, Parkdale, Spruce Avenue, and Westwood. And I thank those community leagues for their support in making this all possible. Now, before we get started, I'm going to acknowledge that all of this is taking place in the wonderful territory of Treaty 6. This is the traditional territory of the Cree, the Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, Stoney, and currently home to many Indigenous peoples. And by living here and working here and doing this, we are all treaty people. And in what I do, I try to live up to the intent of the treaty. Now, I am going to go over some rules for tonight's forum. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to make an opening statement. After that, I will begin asking questions, and you will have up to 2 minutes to answer that question. Once you reach 1 minute and 30 seconds, I'm going to put a little hand emoji to give you a warning that it's time to wrap things up. When it comes to the end of that 2 minutes, I am going to mute you. I apologize for that, but my role here is to ensure that everyone has a fair and equal opportunity to speak and be heard. And I want to be sure everyone has that opportunity. I'm not going to be fact-checking candidate statements. This isn't a debate. I'm not here to interview the candidates. But if a candidate wants to speak to something that another candidate has said, they can. However, they need to wait till it's their turn. They will still only get 2 minutes to speak. So I suggest you keep that down to a minimum. Should you speak at a time you are not invited to speak, I will mute you. And should anything not safe for work appear on your camera behind you, I'm going to turn your camera off. But otherwise, I'm going to do my best not to intervene. And in the interest of fairness, I'm going to rotate who gets asked the first question. So I have you written down in the order that I first saw you. So the beginning order is going to be Gino Akbari, and then Gabrielle Batiste, and Stevenson, Joshua Wolchansky, Adrian Bruff, and then Naima Hale. So with that, let us begin. Candidate Akbari, could you give us a 2-minute statement, please?
First of all, thank you so much for organizing this forum and for the opportunity to participate and chat with you. I came to Canada when I was 19 years old. Prior to that, I had lived in 8 countries to the work that my father did. During my travels, we have witnessed war, political conflict, and sectarianism. We have experienced poverty, I've experienced displacement and near homelessness. But those are the very things that acted as a tool to help me settle here in Canada on my own and put myself through school. My parents and experiences have taught me the importance of community and family, where life is valued, where people have a roof on their heads and food on the table. In terms of work, I owned an Edmonton coffee shop for 3 years. I've worked in the arts, on stage, on camera, and the dance community, and continue to. As part of the government sector, I've spent over a decade falling under the Department of National Defense as a civilian, teaching conflict resolution, culture sensitivity, scenario-based training, relationship building, and negotiation skills to our military troops. My experiences abroad and along with my work here has given me the ability to work with diverse groups of people. And above all, I've learned to approach all challenges with one goal, and that is to find common ground. Some of my priorities include affordable housing and finding a permanent solution for our homeless, environment. I cannot say that enough. Support for local small businesses as I own one. Public resources like libraries, recreation facilities, and parks. Work on anti-racism to make our city more diverse and inclusive. Support for the arts, as I am part of it, and a path to accessible and affordable transit. And thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Candidate Akbari. Candidate Batiste.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much for inviting me to be here and providing this platform for citizens to hear from almost all the candidates. My name is Gabrielle Batiste. I live in O'Damon in Rossdale. My home, my family, and both my businesses are here in the ward. And decisions at council level have affected me on all levels personally. I've witnessed the impact they've had on my neighbors, and I want to create a community that respects and uplifts small and local business, is safe for families, the elderly, and children to walk around in, and encourages healthy and active living. Personally, I've worked my way up from nothing. I have reinvented myself and been resilient over and over again. I've worked as a janitor. I've sold flyers and phone books back when phone books were a thing. I've also sold fruit by the roadside, and I've worked darn hard to get where I am. Right now, I am not backed by, supported by, holding myself out as aligned with or endorsed by any provincial political party or party member. I'm also not aligned with any specific mayoral candidate. I'm here to represent residents, and I've signed the AUMA oath to that effect. In fact, being a lawyer, I rewrote it to make it stronger and then signed it and published it. I want to focus on creating an Edmonton for Edmontonians. I have the life experience, education, and training to hit the ground running without the same learning curve as others. And I have fresh ideas. I know how to build consensus through hard work, and I want Edmontonians to hold me accountable for achieving success. As a city, we're at a critical juncture and need focused and accountable individuals with the right experience to lead us forward. And I believe that I have that passion and experience to be able to represent you well, starting the very first day. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Batiste. Candidate Stevenson.
Hi, and thanks again so much for hosting us tonight. My name is Anne Stevenson. I was born and raised in Edmonton, and after high school, I left the city to pursue studies in international development and economics. And it was during a year abroad when I was working on community development projects that I became really intrigued by a city planning approach to building great communities. That inspired me to carry on and get a master's degree in urban planning in the UK, where I ended up staying for another 5 years. My career in urban design and planning has taken me around the world and back home to Edmonton in 2012. From 2012 to 2019, I worked at the City of Edmonton in a number of leading planning roles, including some community planning work, as well as managing the zoning bylaw team. Throughout that whole time at the city, I was on the board of the Right at Home Housing Society, an organization that's focused on providing a home for every Edmontonian. In 2019, I had the opportunity to join them full-time as a staff member and was delighted to focus my energies there. So as you can imagine, affordable housing and addressing our homeless crisis is a top priority for me. I'm also really passionate about how our communities are built. The 15-minute city, I think, is foundational to the quality of our lives on a day-to-day basis. I'm really excited to bring my experience in land use planning and also working directly within the city, sort of seeing the opportunities for improvement and being able to be a very effective councillor right out of the gates. We have a great opportunity coming out of the pandemic to change our course moving forward. And I'm very excited to help chart a great way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Batiste. Candidate Stevenson.
That was just me, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
oh, that's all right. I won't take another 2 minutes, but thank you.
You. I appreciate your honesty there. My apologies, candidate Wilchansky.
Not a worry. Hi, friends. Lovely to spend some time with you. Thank you, Rat Creek Press, of course, for hosting. Thank you to the other candidates for sharing space. I'm very much looking forward to this. And thanks to everyone who is watching this. This is super exciting. My name is Josh Wilchansky. My pronouns are he, him. You might know me as the loud, outspoken, passionate candidate on social media calling for us to get to work and already being passionate. I feel like I've been training for this job for quite a while. I'm already active in the community. I raise funds for social causes, nonprofits, helped raise funds for organizations like HIV Edmonton, Edmonton Two-Spirit Society, Edmonton Mennonite Center for Newcomers, just to name a few. I grew up in the arts. I went to school at Victoria School of the Arts in Central McDougall for 7 years. I grew up in dance and want to support our artistic community, our live entertainment venues, partnering with hospitality. I'm also a public servant. I work for a province in environmental protection. I previously worked in economic development. Before that, I worked in international relations. I'm proud to have built my life here in Edmonton, and like all of us have. In seeing how the last years have affected our communities, friends have moved away, friends have lost work, community members have lost work. It's hit us hard, and we need a candidate that has a range of experience to actually hit the ground running. You're going to hear that a lot through the forum, I'm sure, and to be able to do the work, right, by bringing people together. With your support, with my experience, with my passion and my curiosity, my ability to create collaboration, we'll address the social and housing crisis. We'll reignite our downtown core and get our economy back on its feet. We'll tackle climate change and build an Edmonton that lasts for generations. And we'll invest in our neighborhoods. We'll stop the urban sprawl, bring investment back into the heart of our city. That means more libraries. That means more dog parks. That means sidewalks. Thank you very much.
Candidate Bruff.
Well, thank you, Matthew, and to the organizers at Rat Creek Press for organizing tonight's forum, and to the other candidates for joining to help make it a success. My name is Adrian Bruff. I'm a community activist and organizer with a 10-year career in the field of social work, and I'm running to become the next city councillor in the new riding, Odamin. I too also want to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting ground and gathering place of the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota, Dene, and so many others. I also want to acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. I grew up in a working poor class family. My mother was a single parent and she raised my brother and I. Growing up poor meant that as kids, there were many nights we went to bed hungry. We didn't have enough food to eat. And at one point, while facing homelessness, we had to rent a room in a house where we shared a kitchen and bathrooms with strangers. So just imagine an entire family of 3 with roommates. All the while, my brother and I saw our mother work odd jobs to make ends meet, sacrificing her own goals and aspirations so that my brother and I can accomplish ours. My brother went on to become a high school teacher and now the author of curriculum books, and I'm running to become your next city councillor. Working class people deserve to be represented by a working class champion. And when our city starts to build back from this pandemic, we need that champion and council. I decided to run for public office because of my background, my experience, and my ties to the community, to contribute in making our city one of the best places to live, raise a family, invest, and retire. We can create safer communities, a thriving economy, and build a city that is affordable and inclusive. And we can accomplish this by addressing the social issues like homelessness, supporting our small businesses, and investing in our families.
Sorry, you are out of time.
Thank you.
Candidate Haley. Ooh, you are muted.
Did you unmute? Okay, sorry. Hello, my name is Naima Haile. Thank you, Rat Creek Press, for organizing this forum for the old candidates. I came to Canada 30 years ago as a refugee from Somalia. I was in my 20s, fresh out of university. And I stumbled upon community services because when I came to Canada, I spoke fluent English and Italian and Somali. So it became a natural fit for me to help newcomers who were coming to Canada at that time in Ontario. I worked with refugees for 30 years. I'm a community development worker. I work on housing issues that refugees face in Central McDougall and Macaulay. There is so much poverty in our midst that I want to do something about it. And that's what has encouraged me to run for office, to have a fair representation. And I strive to see an inclusive, integrated, and safe city for all and equal opportunities. And I'm here running for office. That's my background. I also worked for an international development for 2 years in Somalia and in Kenya, where I was working with women in micro enterprises and youth in conflict resolution.
Thank you, Candidate Haley. All right, so I'm getting quite a few questions in, and I apologize for those watching, but I'm not going to get to all of them. I'm going to answer questions that try and encompass the bulk of this. So I have already gotten quite a few questions about homelessness, and I know the unhoused, homelessness, I suppose. And I know that Ward Odeman has quite a concentration of these services. What is your position on the services provided to the unhoused in this ward? And to answer this first, Candidate Batiste.
Thank you. This is probably the most important question that you're going to ask this evening. And so I'm privileged to be able to provide my thoughts on this. Quite frankly, we don't have the right social supports in place. We have some that are somewhat effective. We have one that is extraordinarily effective, meaning Ambrose Place, that is culturally run, Indigenous developers, Indigenous run, 24/7 wraparound services. They provide palliative care, they house the hardest to house people, and then they provide the housing. So that is what I see as the future of addressing social supports for houseless people. I mean, that's just one part of the issue, because having people without a home or without a house in the ward means that other people are going to perceive that they are unsafe. And it's not just that houseless people are homogeneous. There's not just one kind of a houseless person. There's also a criminal element present as well. And so it's important that we address the different individuals who are at play here and the real risk of safety as a result of those criminal elements that are preying not only on people who live, work, and play downtown, Chinatown, and surrounding communities, but also upon those who are houseless. And it's our job, our number one legislated job as council, to create a viable and safe community. And right now, quite frankly, that's not happening for anyone. Warehousing is not housing. That is just not the way forward. What we need is to decentralize our social supports, because right now we've created a zone of poverty and despair that is just moving outwards. And so we need these smaller wraparound centers that actually house people with proper supports throughout Edmonton, not just located downtown. And we need the right supports, and that encompasses a bunch of different things, including mental and physical.
You are out of time.
Thank you.
Candidate Stevenson.
Thank you. Well, absolutely, this is a top of mind issue for me. And then again, what I get to work in and day out. There's so much that's encouraging that's happening right now, and that we've seen such significant movement at the federal level. Resources have been allocated for housing in such a rapid way that we've never seen before. we have a real opportunity to seize that funding and make a really significant change in Edmonton. So one of the projects I'm most excited for is through the second round of the Federal Rapid Housing Initiative, and it's funding for a number of facilities that are converting existing hotel spaces into bridge housing. Bridge housing is a really important type of housing as it helps people transition out of chronic homelessness into permanent housing. Of course, the wraparound supports on site. I'm really lucky to be involved with Niganan Housing Ventures who run Ambrose Place. They've opened up a new bridge housing facility and another joint venture with the organization I work with, and it's phenomenal to see the outcomes. I think moving forward, thinking beyond sort of just the current crisis, there are a lot of opportunities that the city has and that City Council has to create housing affordability for everyone. I'm really keen to explore a 1% for housing program with our major infrastructure projects, including LRT, which would look at providing land, surplus land at the end of construction for affordable housing around LRT stations. There's also great opportunities with reducing some of the barriers to different types of housing happening in our neighborhood. To the point about how we sort of address it across the ward, and I think as a city as a whole, we do have our 16% sort of minimum target for affordable housing in each and every neighborhood of Edmonton, and that's a goal I would continue to work towards. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Candidate Stevenson. Candidate Wilczynski.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to answer. I think that, the people listening in, you're going to hear really similar themes from across all of the candidates. I think we're all a housing first approach with wraparound social services. We do need to look at the role that council plays. This is an incredibly complex thing. There's a lot of players already in the field, like Niganan, like Savita, that I think that council really can take a very strong supporting role in making sure that we're bolstering capacity there, providing pathways for policy to actually be realized in quick and expedient fashions. Beyond that, I think that we can really lead by removing a lot of the confusion around navigating the system and making it user-friendly, making sure that pathway, that framework to access is empathy, has compassion, has courage. Right now, if you are eligible for affordable housing, you might qualify for subsidy for transit. You might not qualify for other subsidies to facilities. We can standardize that if you're going to be accessing these services, full subsidy here. The City Council's role is to provide services so that Edmontonians can focus on living their lives to the fullest. That includes supportive housing, affordable housing, all the way up to market, making sure that we're actually providing opportunities for families to move throughout the ward. Other things that we need to look at within the affordable and social crisis is the opioid epidemic. 4 Albertans are dying every single day. And the city needs to step up to make sure that we're providing naloxone training, access to supervised consumption, being an advocate for safe supply, really putting harm reduction so that we can really start to examine and address the full framework of this. It's not just about putting people in spaces, it's about providing them with full wraparound services and making sure that they can feel safe and then they can focus on living their lives to the fullest.
Thank you, Candidate Wilczynski. Candidate Bruff.
I've been campaigning for the past 13 months, and homelessness is the #1 issue that is currently affecting our riding. Not only am I qualified on this issue, but I also have a realistic plan on how we can best address the homeless crisis together. It's a 2-part plan for homelessness. The first part of my homeless plan is this. I'm looking to convert the old Remand Center on 97th Street, along with 4 abandoned hotels and apartment buildings on Stony Plain Road, into wellness centers. So what that would look like is the first couple of floors in these centers, we're going to provide all the services that they need. Mental health support, addictions counseling, 24-hour access to food, all the wraparound services downstairs. And then just above that, we're going to build 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom permanent housing for them to stay. The reality is many folks who are homeless are at a stage where we can only provide palliative care, and they're also aging. So these wellness centers will be a good start. When the city did this homeless count at the end of last year, we're sitting at close to almost 2,000 folks who are houseless in our communities. These 5 buildings that I'm looking to retrofit will house up to 1,200 in the next 24 months. The second part of my homeless plan, because the first module won't fit everyone. Unfortunately, not everyone is going to go there. So the second part of my plan is this. I want the city to continue working with other organizations that are already doing good work to house our houseless and clean up across our city. A lot of the abandoned houses that we have that are boarded up, not just here in the core, but across the city. Let's convert some of those abandoned houses into affordable supportive housing, whereas the individual or the family who is homeless can move into those homes, and those agencies will provide them ongoing 24-hour support. Friends, not only is this plan realistic, it's also achievable. And we have a real chance here of reducing homelessness by up to 80% in the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Ruff. Candidate Haley.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer this question. As a Canadian, I'm ashamed that we have so many homelesses, especially in our city. Canada is a rich country, and we should not even be having a conversation about homelessness. When you look at the model Finland took to eradicate homelessness, that's another model that I'm interested in bringing to Edmonton. Also, giving people, homeless people, putting them in housing and not giving them the supports they need for addiction, mental health, and other supports, it will not resolve the problem of homelessness in Edmonton. We need concrete plans to put in place, policies and tangible outcomes. Canada is a very rich country, and we shouldn't be having these conversations about homelessness. I just came from the open house of Civida, and I was quite very impressed what they're doing, how they have revamped their brand, and they're just announced it today that they are opening 240 new units that are so beautiful. There was a video that we were shown, and we need something like that. But the problem they face, as I was talking to the leadership, was that the promise is not putting the money into it. So it's the city and the federal. And the federal government has promised so much money to do new housing and hopefully resolve our homeless issues. Okay.
Thank you, Candidate Haley. And Candidate Akbari.
Thank you for the question. I think the first thing I would do is rent a minivan, put the other dozen councillors in there alongside myself, and take them to one of the camps. When we walk through Dawson Park to the River Valley as an example, you see the camps and you see how people are living. That's the only way you're going to associate and understand homelessness. I've lived it. But where I came from, we had hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people homeless in a third world country. Here, we're looking at one of the richest provinces, and we only have 1,500, about 2,200 given the time of the year. And if we can't solve it right now, then it gets out of hand. I don't believe right now it's out of hand. It is causing us issues financially and health-wise for many people on the ground and in different various organizations. But in the long run, if it does get to a point where we cannot contain it and provide the help that we need, then it will cost us even more. There's 3 levels to this. I think at the roots, what we need to look at where the tap is. There is youths that come from broken families. We need to look at that. We need to provide services and work with organizations that find out where these youths are coming, where these homes are, and provide services for them that we can educate them, because it's a thin margin at that point where they can either go this way or that way. If we can provide services for them, if we can involve them in community, then we have cut this at the root. And up top, there are hotels, there's money that's been provided for us. 4 hotels are being converted. My expertise is to reach out and bring people together to have a solution. And I will definitely work with councillors and with our provincial government to access the rest of the money that have been provided so we can do more with this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Akbari. Okay, so the first person to answer my next question is going to be Candidate Stevenson. And I have a classic for you. Taxes, property taxes have been rising steadily. EPCOR utility rates have been rising. You may have noticed this. What would you do to better manage the expense of operating this city?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. For me, one of the reasons that I see our taxes increasing so significantly over time is the way that we're choosing how to build our city, which includes additional suburban growth. So new areas, new suburban areas come at a very high cost, both now and in the future. Those are roads we have to maintain, sewer systems we have to maintain. And plenty of research shows that lower density areas don't actually recoup the amount of tax dollars in terms of the maintenance and capital costs that building them creates. So I'd really like to see us invest in using our existing infrastructure. Not only does that prevent higher taxes in the future, it also helps address our climate change goals by building a more compact city. Having worked within the city administration as well, I do see some great opportunities for cost savings that happen at a systemic level. So I think sometimes we hear about, trimming this program here or cutting a little bit back here. But from my experience, there are some more systemic issues at play. So for example, well, and ironically, some of those issues relate to trying to manage costs. So in various iterations, there seems to sort of almost always be a hiring freeze at the city, which doesn't mean that no one is hired. It just means that they're only hired on temporary contracts rather than as full-time employees. What that does is create a ton of administrative costs from the HR department, but also for managers who, former colleagues of mine sort of say they spend about 75% of their time, onboarding a new person, then offboarding them as they get a new contract, having to rehire someone. So those types of systemic changes, I think, are fundamentally important to getting the best value for our tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Stevenson. Candidate Wolchansky.
Thank you very much. I think that there are a few levers at council's disposal. I was raised by a single mother as well. And so, watching your pennies, being really mindful about your dollars is the name of the game. And I think when it comes down to it, it's being mindful of our investments. Stopping the sprawl is step one, right? We need to stop the bleed of just building out and out and out, bringing investment back into the heart of our city. Another thing that we need to do is invest into our public service. We need to stop any proposals for privatization. It does create incredible administrative burden. It creates a reduced sphere of control. And it's a slap in the face to city workers, to be quite honest. But I think that there's a bigger piece here. I think that it's fundamentally the governance of our city. Currently, we're under a piece of legislation called the Municipal Governments Act. And that means that we have to go hat in hand to the provincial government for pretty much anything that we want or need. We can only raise revenues through user fees or through taxes. Let's pursue a big city charter. Let's redefine the relationship and let's take the training wheels off of our city. It's time for Edmonton to stand on our own 2 feet and to realize the power of our own voice. That means that we're going to be able to think outside the box. That means that we're actually going to be able to spread our wings and use the creativity and the hard work of Edmontonian spirit so that we can create an Edmonton that lasts and that's respectful with investments of taxpayer dollars.
Thank you, Candidate Wolchansky. Candidate Bruff.
Thank you. As a city, legally, we're not allowed to run a deficit. So the $3 billion that we collect in property taxes, we have to spend that wisely. Spending it on the things that matters to communities, common sense investments. One of the things I'm looking at advocating on council is to put a freeze on council salary increases over the next couple of years, ensuring that we're not seeing that increase for councillors. Also, reduce the costs that our city is currently spending on consultation firms. Those are some of the steps that we can take along with recommendation from stakeholders and community leaders to make sure that we're spending taxpayers wisely and investing in the things that community needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Bruff. Candidate Halle.
I'm interested in looking at infills rather than sprawls. because as I door knocking, I have talked to people who live in parts of the city that pay way more taxes than downtown, and I rather see infills rather than sprawls. Also, taxes. The city needs to have departments work together rather than individual departments and wasting resources. The other thing is, I'd rather build out infrastructure that will cost more with companies for these type of things.
Thank you, Candidate Halle. Candidate Akbari.
Thank you. Yes, common sense spending, absolutely. A freeze to salaries, absolutely. Even in city administration, because we need to take care of the people. We are civil servants, after all. Projects that we put out, like the LRT, the South LRT is done now, but the West LRT, things like that, we need to bring base it on research. We need to look at these projects and look at why we're spending and how much we're putting into these projects. Those are billions of dollars. That is money that we could divert. And the new city plan, I love it. I hope we follow it through, because it brings the sprawl from outside and brings it back in here by creating bike lanes, by eco-friendly architecture. So it all together saves us money. And we need to look at how we can, together with different organizations, look at efficient ways where we can save money and be cost effective. And I think one of the things I can do is bring these different organizations together, including my colleagues at council, to see these things so that we don't run towards or near deficit. And we need to build smart, we need to spend smart. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Akbari. Candidate Batiste.
Thank you. So basically, I agree with a lot of what's been said already, more specifically with the fact that we need to live within our means. These are fiscally scarce times, and we have spent over the last 10 years an awful lot of money on building a city that ideologically we wanted. And unfortunately, in doing that, we have missed the boat on actually giving people what they need. For instance, take our current transit system that just isn't working for anyone. In our ward, we have taken away transit from every single senior's residence. It's unethical. So it is time to look at what kind of businesses the city is in, quite frankly, and look at partnerships, at empowering other organizations, saying yes to economic growth and absolutely not to pet projects that want to turn us into Vancouver and Toronto and not build an Edmonton for Edmontonians. We need to ease up a bit on the social engineering and look at what our service levels are. So we have undertaken cost-cutting efforts in a service review, but we haven't defined those service levels. Having quite frankly, I teach councils for a living on how to do their jobs well, using best practices to get achievable success through measurable KPIs. And right now, we haven't got a set of service levels that are defined, and we are not accountable or transparent in what we're doing. So we need to focus on getting people what they need in order to keep them safe, keep them healthy, keep them mobile, starting with transit, and put a pause on those big projects. And quite frankly, we have revenue that we have access to that we can use. A huge place where we can achieve revenue is working with revenue breaks, is working with other municipalities in Alberta and across Canada.
We're out of time. Thank you. Okay. The first person to answer this next question will be candidate Wolchansky. And let me just peruse my notes for a moment. Okay, I see an interesting one. It has been suggested that the police budget could be frozen and a portion of those funds repurposed. What is your position on on that idea? Candidate Wolchansky.
Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure all the candidates hear this as one of the key things on the doors and with businesses as well. And I think that we do need to diversify our approach to safety. I think that we are deploying police too often to calls that don't merit a police response. We need to make sure that police resources are available to respond to criminal activity, to respond to hate, like acts against Islamophobia or acts of Islamophobia, anti-Asian sentiment, hate that exists within of a criminal activity needs a police response. But not all calls actually need that police response. We need to fund social services. We need to fund responses of empathy, compassion. We need social service response. We need a holistic dispatch response. The recommendations put forth by the BLM, YEG, and the Community Safety and Wellbeing Task Force, I endorse them. I think that they're meaningful pathways, and I think what council really needs to do is set the tone to believe lived experience. If people are experiencing hate, if they feel unsafe in our communities, and they're wanting a different response, council's job is to support that. Council's job is to find frameworks for that to happen. We're not getting rid of police. We're not completely defunding, disbanding Edmonton Police Services. What we are doing is diversifying our approach to making sure that every Edmontonian feels safe, because council's job is to provide services so that you can focus on living your life to the fullest. And that means feeling safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Wolchansky. Candidate Bruff.
Let's talk policing and budgets. I'm of the belief that the role of police have become too broad. Police are being asked to do more to address the growing complex needs of our communities that don't fall under the traditional policing responsibilities. As I've said, I've spent the last 10 years of my career working with our most vulnerable residents. We must do better in supporting these communities, and I have a plan. Let's invest in neighborhood watch programs. Let's invest in social service initiatives like 3 to 6 Outreach, Bear Camp Patrol, Reach Edmonton Crisis Diversion Team, my 2-part plan towards homelessness, Safer Macaulay, Revitalize Macaulay, 211, Safer Chinatown. These are organizations and initiatives that are already doing good work in our community to address crime and safety. Let's work with those organizations along with the resources from the police to best handle and address and keep safety within our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Bruff. Candidate Haley.
Thank you, Matthew. I don't believe in defunding the police, because as a Black Muslim woman, I need the police to protect me for cowards who attack women in isolated spaces. So I'm not into the business of defunding the police, because for that reason. The other thing is, I've been talking to police officers and asked them what they think about this discourse about defunding the police. And they said the police work is so spread that they are overworked and overspread. So I will suggest that we need to build social services to go in situations where the police is not needed and there is no criminal activity involved. There has been several cases and incidents where families called for mental health emergency to the police, and the patients end up dead, shot by the police. We cannot afford to do that. We cannot afford to kill innocent people who experience mental health or don't speak English, or they're going through psychosis and the police kills them. No, we need to have social services that can work with the police and social workers, community workers, but this takes time. So we need time to work with the police and come up with the tangible solutions on how to protect people.
Thank you, Candidate Haley. Candidate Akbari.
Thank you. I think the core of this topic has been because of the events that have happened around us in the past 5 to 10 years. But the terminology that we've used, it was designed to get a reaction from people, and it has worked. But I think it has also created a gap. And when we say defund the police, the other side, there's a rebellion that says fund the police. Because to some people, when that comes across as shutting down the police, I think where I come from, it was always about bringing people together. How I would approach it is to tell the police department that, you know, what you do is incredible, but what I want to do is help you by providing you the tools to do your job better. And by taking some of that money and reallocating it to people that are experts in that department. And then they can go and learn from them, and to put some money towards training for police officers in those sort of scenarios where they can deal with mental health, with addiction and things like that, because you cannot just take a cultural sensitivity course once a year on the internet and get your certificate and you're done. You're dealing with these situations every day, and it's bombarding your brain every day. So equally, every day you need to go through these reminders, and that can begin with these type of trainings for the police officers. And most of all, this is a simple thing. Please, in your values, like they do in the United Kingdom, where you put as your values to protect and serve, put compassion. Because when you put compassion, then all your interviews, your hiring process, your training are based on that. And in the UK, the interviewer always asks, in a scenario like this, how would you compassionately deal with a situation like that? And that will aid them in the duties and the jobs they do to protect us. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Akwari. Candidate Batiste.
Hi. This is a great question. And I just want to say right up at the front, I do not believe in defunding the police. And there are a variety of reasons for that. Quite frankly, you don't just lop money off the top of a budget and hope that it solves anything. That's not how budgeting works. It's not how finance works. And it's not how making change works. That's just not financially sound management. But what is important is that we do have policing where we need it, and we need to support that. So right now, the most said thing to me on every doorstep where I've door knocked, and I've door knocked on every doorstep, is that people don't feel safe in their communities. Full stop. That is the number one. It's not anything else. And in particular, in downtown Chinatown and surrounding communities. So I do believe that we need to have police officers out doing community policing. I don't believe that they need to be doing social work, but I've already taken steps to help solve that. I've already incorporated and am working with a number of people, experts, police chiefs, ex-police officers, academics, people with lived experience across Canada to lobby for a national policing college. We created the Coalition for Canadian Police Reform to address what Gino had said. There needs to be systemic change. There needs to be ongoing training. And this training, this professional college, to address one of the things that was brought up by the task force, will be from a lived person experience. So I have run the police commission before. I was the first woman, first non-cop. I understand policing inside and out in terms of finances, what works, what doesn't work. And I do have the right skill set to be able to make substantive change where it matters. Right now, 211 is not an option. It's just not supported well enough, because when I call and anybody else calls, it's a 45-minute wait. Then I end up calling the EPS, and then I get diverted.
I'm sorry, you are out of time.
Thank you.
Candidate Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, and certainly one of great importance on a number of levels. So the Community Safety and Wellness Task Force found that 1/3 of police calls are for people in distress rather than any criminal activity. So I think right off the bat, that really speaks to the fact that police are being asked to respond to situations that they're not equipped or trained for. The other really important consideration is a fiscal one. We spend more on police than we do on our parks, our libraries, our leisure centers, and our social services combined. So it's a significant portion of our budget, and we absolutely need to be sure that we're getting value out of that money. I fully support reallocating police resources to community safety and outreach teams that are staffed by mental health and social work professionals. I also think it's so incredibly important for us to address systemic racism in the police force and work closely with racialized communities and Indigenous communities that currently are not well served by that service in all cases. I really look to the community to, I should say, I would like the city to provide resources to those communities so that they can lead some of that reform. And together we can come up with a system that works for all Edmontonians. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Stevenson. All right. So next to answer first will be candidate Bruff. And all right. There are some properties in Ward Odeman, you may have noticed, that are not as nice as others, and perhaps are not great neighbors to the properties beside them. What would you do about problem properties in this ward? Candidate Bruff.
Sorry, you're right. My ward do have a lot of abandoned properties in the area. And thankfully, I'm the only candidate that actually have a plan on how to address it. I do have on my website an abandoned property initiative. Folks can check it out when they get a chance. Properties that are abandoned or neglected have had negative impact on our communities. These impact affects neighborhood houses, taxes, revenues, health, and safety. Over the years, these properties have increased within our urban core communities, and they have a high percentage in neighborhoods that have aging infrastructure. I want the city to partner in redeveloping some of these properties, and my vacant and abandoned property initiative will do just that. Let's work with stakeholders and homeowners, including homeowners, to remove dilapidated homes in our communities. We will then work with the property owner and provide incentives such as a property tax reduction or exemption to property taxes that's transferable from one owner to the next up to 10 years. Let's also provide grants through the community sustainable grants and other incentives to encourage homeowners to clean up some of those properties. The goal is to then work with communities that are affected by these empty lots and convert them into community spaces, whether that's a community garden or develop a new home, affordable home. These are some of the initiatives that I'm looking to put forward in addressing problem properties in our communities. And this will apply for properties that are 5 years plus, that have been abandoned in our communities for 5 years plus. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Bruff. Candidate Hilly.
Thank you, Matthew. As I have been door knocking, I've met so many residents and home owners in Odemin who have issues with property, problem properties. And these since the city is governance, we need to come up with policies and bylaws to hold the landlords responsible for their property. And we need to have timelines, how long they can come up with solutions. Like as my colleague Adrian said, provide grants, provide solutions, because it's an eyesore to the community. It devalues the properties of the neighborhood. I will work with neighbors, the neighborhood, and talk to them and ask them what kind of initiatives we can do. How can we resolve?
Thank you, candidate Helly. Candidate Akbari.
Thank you. Yes, that broken window thing, isn't it? Places like that has affects not only financially, but it also affects psychologically to the people that live there. And not only that, but it also attracts the wrong kind of things there. And I've taken some walks in places like that on 97th Street, just past 109 Avenue. And those issues that impact the neighborhood as well. There are examples of these around the world, cities that have solutions to these things. So what I would do is to consult with them, to ask them what they're doing. What can we do to replicate their successes here? And then try to convince my fellow colleagues to see that as well. Because there's great opportunity for us to learn from places that we don't have to reinvent anything. And yes, we do need to absolutely hold the people that own these places to these standards. We do have policies, but we need to implement them. We need to follow through. And if a land is sitting there for more than 2 or 3 years and nobody's looking after it, it's just going down the drain, please raise their taxes, tax them. Why are we not doing that? Because if we do that, then it will actually tell the developers or the people that own it and they're sitting on it that you can't just sit on it till the values go up or whatever comes across your table, and then you use that to profit more. You can't go through that. And the way we can do that is actually to have those taxes in place, to actually enforce these policies that are in place already. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Akbari. Candidate Batiste.
Thank you. So it's not okay for owners to abdicate responsibility for their properties. And quite frankly, just in response to something that was said earlier, I'm fairly certain that we all have plans in place for derelict and abandoned housing, good ones, achievable ones. And this is another one of those. So the way that you affect that is not by throwing money at them. That's not going to achieve anything. What you do is you review and revise your bylaws, policies, and processes, and you empower enforcement against these properties. Right now, I have gone and walked around. I've taken pictures of the needles and the meth instruments that are just laying around for pets to step on, for kids to step on. People take those pathways, and people have lit fires in the houses. They're living there and they're abusing the residences, and the owners are abdicating their responsibility. We can't allow it. So I would advocate for and push for revising the bylaws to increase enforcement, to make demolition faster, to increase the taxation to amounts that will make sure that these people don't actually leave their houses derelict and or abandoned. And then I'd go in and demolish them and repurpose that land. Thanks.
Thank you, Candidate Batiste. Candidate Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you for raising this really important issue. We do face limitations as a city around our abilities to tax different properties differently. So unfortunately, there are just restrictions under the provincial legislation. But, you know, as mentioned by my colleagues here, there are bylaws. So our community standards bylaw is a tool that speaks to the requirement to keep properties in good condition. But a major weakness of that bylaw is that the maximum fine is $250. So for many, that's not a disincentive. Another challenge that we face, you know, in areas of the ward is that neighbors actually feel quite uncomfortable reporting derelict properties. They face repercussions, whether it's, you know, neighbors yelling at them to having their tires slashed. So one approach I'd really like to take, so first of all, amending the community standards bylaw to ensure that fines are much higher than $250 and that they are the onus on community members to be doing that reporting and that follow-up. And ensuring that we're investing in the city enforcement teams so that they're the ones doing some proactive, proactive investigation to identify problem properties, and then continue to do the follow through. It shouldn't be on the shoulders of neighbors to continually make those calls and those follow-ups, particularly when it comes at personal risk to them. I also really appreciate the city's current housing redevelopment grant that is providing affordable housing providers like the one that I work for, the opportunity to purchase and redevelop derelict properties in the community. I think that's a great way to bring investment into different neighborhoods and would certainly continue or encourage that program to continue.
Thank you, Candidate Stevenson. Candidate Wilczynski.
Thank you very much. Gabby, loved the passion in your response and really enjoyed the meaningful pathways that you provided. And, you know, listeners, you've heard different pathways that we sort of have. There are grants in place. I fully support that we would, you know, penalize vacancies, make it more appealing to actually have affordable rents there, because there is a huge long lineup to access housing. And so we need to create pathways where we're actually looking at it from a framework perspective. But, Anne said something really key there that I think goes back to something earlier that we said. We are limited in our powers by the Municipal Governments Act. This city is still constrained. We're still caged by our ability to realize our full potential to actually have autonomy over how we run our city. We have a lack of control over our own city. The next council really has an opportunity to pursue a big city charter so that we redefine the relationship on how it is that we are building our city, how it is that we're able to raise revenue, how it is that we're able to keep citizens safe and keep communities accountable so that we don't have derelict properties, so that we don't have situations where a vacant property is there for 5 years and that we just have truancy happening. I think another piece that we also have to look at in the shorter term is the ghettoization of certain places within O'Damon. I know a lot of places people are moving away from Boyle and Macaulay because they feel that it is being ghettoized, because they feel that it is becoming a dumping ground for social services. All of these pieces are interlinked, and we need to actually address that. A greater distribution of social services, of supportive and affordable housing will help feed into retention of landowners. It's all connected, and I think that it really is taking that macro lens. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Wilczynski. Next to speak first is candidate Halle. A large portion of the new ward O'Damon is taken up by the Blatchford site. What is your opinion on what's happened at that site, and what do you think should be done from here?
I pass.
Very well. Candidate Akbari.
Oh, God. It is something I would say absolutely to be proud of. Let me say that very clearly. The vision, the idea, the sentiment behind this is first of its kind in the world, and it could be the largest project of such a thing in North America. That is, in many ways, our future. And as we build it, we are going and achieving a lot of things environmentally and financially. We're saving money and we're protecting our environment. There has been complications to it. Yes, there has been, stops and gaps here and there, but we are making our way through it. I think for the past 10 years, what it's done just for the development world, where developers have gained expertise to be able to retrofit these homes, to build these homes, zero emission, zero carbon. This what's happening here is first of its kind. And I think those expertise then lends it to the future, to what we want to build, to how we want to take the city from out there and bring it in. So in many ways, I am in support of it. And if we can figure out a step-by-step way to move forward through it, I think it'll do us a lot of good in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Akbari. Candidate Batiste.
Thank you. This is a project where the city should never have been the developer. The city is overreaching by quite a bit and has to stop putting its finger into every single pie. We're not a daddy state. If we're talking about empowering organizations, that also includes development. And we should stay and provide the services that we're good at providing, although we haven't been good at that lately, but we need to actually refocus and get better at that and stay out of the development area. That's not our space, and we're not good at it, as you can tell by the exceedingly vacant Blatchford. It was an amazing vision, to Gino's point. It is an amazing vision, but it's also way too ideological and absolutely not achievable. In speaking with the developers who have been approached and begged to be there, they won't touch it with a 10-foot pole, full stop. The plan for there is condos, 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 and that's not the market either. So I think that we need to proceed by looking at reducing the standards, not eliminating them, just not being best in class. Even the people who propose the vision don't even have it on their website anymore as the way to go. So I really think that a common sense, practical approach that takes into account our desire to influence climate change positively needs to be taken, but let's be realistic and stay out of the game of development. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Batiste. Candidate Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to speak about Blatchford. I think it is a very exciting project on a number of levels. Again, speaking of the opportunity to reduce our urban sprawl, it's a fantastic infill opportunity. I do believe that the city is well placed to be the lead developer there. And there were certainly times, in my time at the city where that project was maybe stalling, but I believe that the new leadership that's in place now is just doing a phenomenal job of moving the project forward. And it's exciting for me. I have friends in the community, and every time I go up, there's new construction, there's new homes being built. And more than that, a great sense of community. People are excited to be part of that vision. I think it's a great opportunity for the development industry as a whole to have the city maybe take on some of that risk of the new approach to district energy, for example. And by other home builders being part of that development, there's a real opportunity to increase that knowledge and that wherewithal so that we can replicate this across communities in Edmonton. A challenge or a disappointment that I'm seeing right now is just in regards to affordable housing. So the original area redevelopment plan for Blatchford called for 20% of homes to be affordable, so non-market affordable housing. That was at one point revised down to 10%. I'd advocate very strongly that target be moved back up to at least 16%, which again is the citywide target for every neighborhood. And that we proactively work with affordable housing providers to ensure that they have land available in Blatchford so that we can build a truly inclusive community and show true leadership, both environmentally, fiscally, and socially. Create a sustainable community. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Stevenson. Candidate Wilczynski.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so similar to other thoughts that you've heard on this call, I think the vision of Blatchford, what it tried to achieve, is noble. I think that it was an incredibly disrespectful investment of taxpayer dollars. I think that the city has so many other spaces where it needs to focus its finite resources that this became a vanity project. I think that there's such an amazing, noble cause of what it is trying to achieve. I think that council needs to know when to lead, support, get the heck out of the way. This was an opportunity to sort of go between support and get out of the way. I think that we could have been a partner, we could have counseled, we could have provided other resources and other ways to support this moving forward so that we're able to achieve that vision. But it shouldn't have come down to taxpayer dollars that were being invested into this. We have climate change that we need to address. We need to address the social and housing crisis. We need to reignite our downtown core. We need to invest in our neighborhoods. This became an infill project that became a vanity project that is now a scar on the face of Edmonton. And I love what it was trying to achieve. But as Anne said, we moved the needle down from what is going to be affordable housing. So even that noble cause of trying to be truly inclusive, part of it was lost. We need to move that back up. As a councillor, we are invested. We need to see this project through because we don't do things halfway. We will see this through and we will complete this. But if it came across council's desk today, I wouldn't approve that for taxpayer dollars to be invested. We have other spaces where we need to take care of Edmontonians. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Wilczynski. Candidate Bruff.
I think this was a missed opportunity to do a public-private partnership between the city and developers. The Blatchford development has taken up a lot of the city's time and financial resources. I believe the city's responsibility lies with providing necessary public infrastructure that anchors around attracting high qualities of development that fosters community gathering, which includes things such as transportation, gardening, playground, meeting spaces, facilities that folks want to be a part of and want to enjoy. I think that should be the role of city when it comes to developing in some of these communities. And as we build a city for 2 million people, the type of infrastructure and development and density that we're creating within our city will also be important. And Stevenson spoke a little bit about this. When I was door knocking in Blatchford, I even got a tour of one of the show houses. The houses are too expensive. They're not meeting affordable housing standard according to the market rates. And that's something that I'm concerned about too. So again, this is a missed opportunity between the city to have private developers actually come in and help develop that space in a cheaper, more affordable way. And that's something we hope as a city, for example, with the exhibition land, that we don't make that mistake in regards to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, candidate Bruff. All right, next to answer first will be candidate Akbari. And I have an interesting one. There are quite a number of post-secondary institutions in Ward Odeman. These young people, unfortunately, sometimes move away. What would your policy be to attract young people to remain and stay and continue to live in Ward Odeman?
We were just talking about that last night. Yes, we do. One, we can stop cutting funding. Sorry to put that in there. What we have, like what they have in Australia, as an example, second best export, I would say, is education. We have not, despite having some of the best universities and having one of the best universities in North America, in Canada, we have not advertised it. When we bring students in, when we bring these people in, they live here, they stay here, they invest back into the community. We have not also leveraged the fact that a lot of these students, when they're done, are looking for opportunities, are looking to stay here and to work a lot of times. But we need to look at and work with the provincial government and as well as the federal to see if we can have immigration policies where we can make it easier for them. We also need to develop courses that can leverage people's skills for what we need right now and for what we need for the future. As an example, going through Dawson Park, yes, there's a lot of encampments. There's a lot of people around the river valley. But one of the things I notice, despite all the things, whether you agree or disagree with it, the amount of imagination and creativity. You should see some of these places that have built fences and things like that. These people are human beings that have talent and skills. We can leverage that. We can find organizations that can encourage those people to go in and create courses where we can teach them and bring them back into society, and that gives them hope. And when we give them hope, that's part of solving the issues with homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Akbari. Candidate Batiste.
Thank you. This particular topic is near and dear to my heart. I have a 27-year-old son who was going to NAIT, and he is also autistic. He's a cancer survivor. He's a type 1 diabetic. He, along with many, many others, are going to require inclusive opportunities and accessible opportunities. That is, those both are huge here, and we need to be able to provide those. What I mean by inclusive is not just, the bare minimum wage positions. We have to have good employment opportunities for kids and young adults that are graduating from university and that are putting themselves working those jobs through university in order to create a better future for themselves. We need to encourage them to stay here, invest here, and raise their families here. And I'm going to go back to the fact that we just simply don't have an inviting atmosphere right now in terms of safety. So this isn't somewhere that people see themselves settling. And that starts with, at the very minimum, power washing the alleys and streets and getting them clean and safe for people to have, putting receptacles out and having washrooms. But back to the kids, one of the things that we can do as city council is we can set the tone at the top in culture at the city. And quite frankly, we need a redo. We need a reset because our HR practices aren't great. We need to do away with cover letters. English as a second language shouldn't be a barrier. There are so many jobs, well-paying jobs that people can do not having to know English. We can have quiet spaces so that kids with autism can actually function well in an environment. We need to have support, and we need to work hand in hand collaboratively with the agencies and communities that understand what the barriers are. like, for instance, the Center for Intellectual Excellence. There are a number of agencies out there and organizations that are providing opportunities for training already that are
I'm sorry,
creating
you are out of
community.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Stevenson.
Yeah, you know, I think one of the best retention strategies for students in the city is to provide a high quality of life, and that includes, you know, compact, vibrant, walkable communities, and also a range of affordable housing options. You know, right now Edmonton still does enjoy a fairly competitive to the market, so ensuring that we're taking strategies that that make it easy for people to stay and settle. I think there's also a great opportunity, speaking with Global Edmonton and the work that they're doing to attract international investment, and as well with the U of A, and the close relationship between the research that's happening at the U of A and spin-off industries. So that's in advanced manufacturing, in tech, and in health and life sciences. So by creating sort of a funnel, I suppose, from research from the academic side into economic opportunities in the region, not only provides a great way to retain people here, but also to create more job opportunities for everyone in the city. You know, in terms of some of the specific actions that the city administration can take, there are quite a few summer student programs that provide students the opportunity to get work experience through the city. I think those are excellent opportunities, both for the students and for the organization. So I'd certainly want to continue encouraging those programs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Stevenson. Candidate Wolchansky.
Thank you very much. I love this question, and I think that it's there's a lot of different pieces that feed into stopping our brain drain and making sure that we are attracting a younger generation, students, and keeping them here. Part of it is investing in public infrastructure, making sure that we have quality, affordable transit. I've proposed here in the heart of our city a fare-free transit circulator route that goes around the communities in the heart of our city, making it easier to get to school, making it easier to have errands. Public infrastructure should work for you. That also extends to things like libraries, making sure that you've got maker spaces where you can innovate, where you can try new things, where you can learn more outside of just your institutional learning. And I think that there's more that goes into it. I think that it's investing into a vibrant arts and culture scene. I've already been working in the hospitality, the arts, live entertainment sphere for a number of years. By activating our spaces, by investing in festivals, by creating dedicated liaisons like the Night Mayor, who are going to actually be there as city council support, as city administration support, to make sure that we are providing opportunities to have fun in our city. Our arts and culture scene is unlike anything in this world. We need to lean into that. We need to attract not just students, but also artists and make sure that they're coming together to create amazing opportunities. I also think that Anne did touch on this, creating incubators, job shadowing, job mentoring opportunities for you to actually explore the different pieces that are available within here, like machine learning, like AI, like tech, where you're able to experience the rich diversity of our systems. We also need to look at our power systems. We need to make sure that we are encouraging fresh leaders and new ideas. And that means that we need to fundamentally change the approach, like our electoral systems. You know, let's make it easier for you to access power systems.
I'm sorry, you are out of time.
Thank you very much.
Candidate Bruff.
Thank you. And when I was a youngster out of university, this was one of the questions that I was thinking about. What's going to keep me here in Edmonton? And the diversity and inclusion was one of the reasons why I decided to stay here. But I was also excited about the opportunities that the city has, especially being such a young city. We can ensure that we're providing good paying jobs. We're investing in diversifying our economy. We're providing skills upgrade training so that Edmontonians can meet the jobs of tomorrow. Arts and festivals, let's continue investing in those initiatives. The environment, we need to protect our environment for future generations. Affordable housing, you know, in 2018, I had saved up enough money to get a down payment and bought my first condo. And now I own a 2-bedroom condo in Oliver. I'm a homeowner, and that was an accomplishment that I'm so proud of today. We can also ensure that we're investing in our recreation and our community and amenities. Public transit, those are things that young folks want to see in our community, and those are things I'm going to be investing in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Candidate Bruff. Candidate Halley.
Oh, thank you. I will start by utilizing good investment in attracting businesses to work with students to provide opportunities and utilizing work where you can live, by building pockets where you don't have to travel to work and you can get to work and create some sort of balance of work through investment policies. Communities like McDougall and Boyle to be able to attract new people and young families and connecting communities through arts and sports. Tech Edmonton and incubators where we use as co-model spaces, so the investments isn't so high to take a chance on small businesses. So that is pretty summers of my response.
Thank you, Candidate Halley. Okay. So the first person to speak this time should be Candidate Batiste. I'm keeping track of this correctly. All right, so this is a direct one. What is affordable housing and how would you provide it?
So affordable housing is different from sustainable housing, and it's different from near market housing and market housing. Affordable housing is something that is within your budget to afford, and that's currently defined as not more than 30% of what it is you make, so that net that's going out the door in terms of housing. And that's difficult for a lot of people. And certainly we don't have that kind of housing readily available in this city. In fact, more and more people who work several jobs are losing their housing because they can't afford it. And when we went through that experience where mortgages were able to be expanded to 40 years at a time and rates were so low and everybody got a mortgage, that was a great idea. But you know what that ends up happening, because mortgage rates are going back up, people are going to start losing their homes. And that's going to, end that kind of affordability. And so it is really important that we all work together with federal and provincial governments here and with the banking institutions, and as a team, collaborate on the best way with the developers as well. Collaborate on the best way to make sure that we have housing that's within every budget, not just within my budget or your budget, but is available for students, because housing is one of the prime determiners of of being stable, financially stable in your world. And that's critically important to keeping people here in this city and in reducing our houseless population. So we need to collaborate. We need to have the right people at the table and all the people that matter, as well as working with the communities and the community leagues to make sure that we're not disrespecting those communities in how we build that housing.
You are out of time.
Thank you.
Candidate Stevenson.
Thank you. This is a topic I could probably speak on for a full hour on its own. But for me, affordability does exist across the entire spectrum. For me, housing is a human right. And affordability as a general term just means that you're able to have this essential shelter that you need without having to compromise your other basic needs. There are people right now in our city, first of all, who don't have homes at all. Others where housing is costing them 70, 80, 90, and in some cases 100% of their income. And they aren't able to meet their other basic needs. So again, for me, affordability is different for different people, but it's really ensuring that you can be housed without having to compromise the necessities of life. From a city planning perspective as well, when we look at housing affordability, it's also so critical to look at transportation costs as well. So when we look at our suburban development, one of the benefits it does have is that it does provide housing that is more affordable. First-time home buyers are typically better able to access housing in new neighborhoods. But the challenge there is that what's not factored into the cost of the house is the cost of the, 2 or 3 vehicles that household will need in order to get around in their daily life. And transportation costs really do add significantly to a household budget. So when we're talking about household affordability, again, it's not just the cost of the individual unit, but the cost of where that home is located. So for me, investing in our communities to ensure that they're compact and walkable, and that we're providing a range of housing options. So in O'Damon, that means, right now we've created some space for, the work that I did at the city. We focused on providing more opportunities for secondary suites, for duplexes, for row housing. And it's really ensuring that all of those different price points and housing options are available in each neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Wolczynski.
Thank you, Moderator Clywitt. I think this is really timely. I was just up knocking in Westwood yesterday, and had an interaction with someone on the doors who was at her wit's end. She was a mother. Her family moved away, and then her daughter had to move back in with the grandkid because they both work in hospitality. We're not providing a living wage. I'm right on board with Anne. Housing affordability is from supportive all the way up to market. Edmontonians should be able to access housing, but still be able to focus on the rest of their lives. The person who I was talking on the doors with yesterday, she said, look, I love my family, but I just want to be a grandma. I don't want to have to still be a mom. I don't still want to have to do this, but we're putting our residents in situations where they have no other choices, where we are taxing people's empathy. My mom was a single parent, as I said, and we moved in with grandma back in 2000. We were lucky. We were lucky that we had a support network that we could fall back on. So many in our ward don't have that same. And I want to fight to make sure that we change that. I want to fight to make sure that we are investing in strategies where people can focus on living their lives to the fullest, where they can focus on building a family within O'Damon. If you want to build a family, most times you're going to move away, you're going to move to a bedroom community, you're going to move, which contributes to our sprawl. We need to make sure that we're actually holding policies to account where we are developing larger suites, 3-bedroom suites where your family can be there, that don't cost you 80% of your income, 50% of your income. We need empathy in our policy making decisions so that people can focus on living their lives to the fullest.
Thank you, Candidate Wolczynski. Candidate Bruff.
So, as I said earlier, I bought my first home in 2018, and affordable housing to me is being able to pay the property tax. Affordable housing to me is being able to pay the mortgage. Affordable housing to me means being able to pay the insurance that comes with owning this property. Affordable housing to me means not being priced out of my community because of expensive developments next doors. Affordable housing to me means being able to afford transportation, groceries, to live in my community, to contribute, to shop locally. That's what affordable housing means to me. And I want to create a city where every single Edmontonian have a real chance of own ownership and being able to take care of their own homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Bruff. Candidate Hilly.
Yeah. Affordable housing. I believe that housing is a fundamental human rights issue. Like a rich country like Canada, we should not be even having a discussion or even a political debate about housing. But unfortunately, our reality is different here in Canada and in Edmonton in particular. I know lots of people who I have been talking to have a serious issue about paying their rent. I was door knocking in one of those apartments in McDougall, and this newcomer woman told me that she works a full-time job and she makes less than $2,000 a month, and she has a child who she cannot afford childcare, so she asks her neighbor to look after her child while she's working. At the end of the month, when she pays her bills, basic things like grocery, rent, she ends up with $42. That's unacceptable. I know people, young people who finished universities, who have good jobs, but yet they cannot buy a home. I know people who have worked for 15, 20 years who make over 100,000, and yet they cannot afford to buy a home because of the market issues that they face. And it's a shame. It's a shame. So the notion of I worked with co-op housing for a long time, and their model is 30% off.
Thank you, Candidate Hele.
Mhm.
Candidate Akbari.
You're right, it is a human rights issue. I've been there, I've been homeless, I've experienced it firsthand, and I've been with my mother. We did manage to find a room on top of a roof, and the bathroom was 6 floors down. So I understand it, I get it. Affordable housing, how we can help, first of all, we need to provide people with proper wages so they can have the ability to pay their rents, to buy the food, and have some money left at the end of the day to save. We can also help by transits, by minimizing fares, by providing sort of donate a ticket for people. I think Kim Kroschel had talked as a mayor, she had talked about things like that. She had done that project by providing accessible routes for people from work to home through things like bike lanes, by creating with the school system and rec centers programs for kids, after school programs where they can access it without having to pay anything, which then acts as after school day as well. Those are the places you can also save money. We also need to work with the developers to make sure that they're not only providing places where people can live with 1 bedroom, but also 2 bedroom and 3 bedroom places. So a lot of these families have, you know, 2, 3, up to 2 to 3 children. So it is everybody's right to have access to these things. It is everybody's right to live in downtown. It is everybody's right to live in any neighborhood they want. And we should provide that opportunity for everybody. It's about 20,000 Edmonton households spend more than 50% of their income on their housing. That's 20,000. And we can help minimize that by providing those proper wages and by providing those other sorts of resources where they can save money. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Akbari. All right, so the next person to answer first will be Candidate Stevenson. So in addition to the many humans in Ward Odeman, the city is also to some extent responsible for quite a few animals, such as Lucy the elephant and coyotes in the river valley. What is your position on the welfare of these animals?
Well, thank you. I mean, I think to take those 2 spectrums, and I'm also, I mean, so many other animals come to mind as well. But to speak first to Lucy the elephant, I know that there are groups that feel very strongly that she's not in a healthy space right now, and that the veterinarians at the zoo maintain that she's receiving the care that she needs, and that it wouldn't be safe to remove her. It's very challenging because I think both of these groups fundamentally have Lucy's best interests at heart. And I have no doubt about that. And yet they see very different outcomes for what should happen in her best interest. I don't believe that council is well placed to make decisions on the welfare of animals. We don't have the expertise to do that. Something that I would support is exploring a joint selection process for an independent review of Lucy's conditions that all parties could agree to abide by. In terms of coyotes, and I want to expand, I mean, there's coyotes, there's feral cats in our city, which is an incredibly interesting and complex problem. And of course, also other wildlife that use our river valley as a key corridor. When we're planning our cities and managing our spaces, it's important that we ensure that we acknowledge all the systems and all the animals that take part in our city spaces and accommodate them appropriately. I think wildlife corridor planning in the river valley is really key. We need to address pinch points that exist, ensure that future development in the river valley isn't exacerbating any existing missing links in those biodiversity corridors. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Stevenson. Candidate Wilczynski.
Thanks, Matthew. This is a great question. I think that specifically talking about wildlife corridors, one thing that I've proposed is a River Valley Ambassador Program. Currently, our only presence within the River Valley is enforcement based. I want to build a cultural of environmental interpretation to facilitate the safe use, the recreation of our River Valley. This includes educating about wildlife corridors, why it's so important for us to retain wildlife corridors, for us to create an Edmonton and a culture where people are fiercely passionate about this writ large. It also includes things like traditional ecological knowledge, centering Indigenous knowledge, because as we said, as we open this, this is Treaty 6 territory, lands that have been governed, traveled since time immemorial by First Nations people. As we build our city, as we interact with our city, I think it's so important that we center Indigenous voices and ask compassionately about how best we can build and how best we can interact with the gem of our city, our River Valley. Beyond that, I think speaking about animals, I think that making sure that we're investing in the heart of our city, including more dedicated dog parks, more dog-friendly amenities, and also just from accessing housing and from accessing shelters as well, that we create standards around people being able to bring in their furry companions. Because, currently there are a lot of people who can't access the shelter system because they do have a pet accompanying them. From a policy perspective, how I will help support this is by setting a tone with compassion, with empathy, with courage, so that we're still able to be inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Wilczynski. Candidate Bruff.
I do. I received an email from Team Leap asking my position on Lucy the elephant and some of the steps that we can take to creating a more safer, welcoming environment for Lucy. I do support putting Lucy on the city council's meeting agenda to be discussed, and support an unbiased third-party independent assessment of Lucy the elephant at our city hall. I know when you talk about coyotes, residents in Westwood are affected by this dearly. I was talking to Elizabeth, and she was worried that one of her cats that was missing she might have lost that cat to a coyote that's in the cemetery close by. I think as a city, we can do more to ensure that we're educating the public about wildlife and how to stay safe around them and how to keep our household pets safe. And also do what we can as a city to make sure that these wildlife are having less contact with us. But so those are some of the steps that we can take as a city to make sure that we are addressing the coyote issue, and of course, providing a full detailed assessment for Lucy the elephant and the recommendation from that assessment, and as a city, what we can do to make sure that we're providing that caring, compassionate way for Lucy the elephant. Thank you so much.
Thank you, candidate Bruff. Candidate Helly.
Okay. As a child who grew up in Africa, I love elephants and animals. And for Lucy's case, I'm not an expert, and we need to hear from those specialists that know about it to advise us on how to make Lucy's transition easier. In terms of coyotes, yes, there are lots of coyotes, and these new developments are pushing out animals and give them nowhere to go. We're talking about bringing experts to meet with the council as first responders, to spend money in consulting, and go from there, because animals need a safe space, a safe environment to live. And as far as I'm concerned, those new developments and buildings are not providing solutions for our wildlife.
Thank you, candidate Helly. Candidate Akbari.
Thank you. I have nothing but love for you, Lucy, and I will say that out loud. Am I an expert to know what's best for her? I am not. Some of my colleagues recommended having independent, consultation. Absolutely. I think people need to decide what's best for Lucy, and it's not my place to make that decision as an animal lover, personally, not on council. I could say I would always do everything I can to make her life better. That's my personal thing. Whether we have, for lack of a better word, jurisdiction to interfere, but we can definitely provide an independent organization to come in and find out what's best for Lucy, and a decision can be made from there. In terms of the coyote situation, one of my neighbors was with her 3-year-old in the park the other day. She turned around to pick something up, and the coyote that she had seen pass by was charging her grandson. And so I think the reference is to that aggressiveness and boldness that we are seeing in the coyote population. I am all for animal rights, but if it is coming down where human lives are being affected and the animal lives that our pets are being affected, I think what we need to do is look at what Nova Scotia has done and PEI has done in terms of their coyote population. They have a good model. There's no need for us to reinvent things. We can adapt it, we can look at it and make it fit our climate, our geography. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Akbari. Candidate Batiste.
I'm so excited to answer this question. So as council member, I mean, the zoo is a city service, and we absolutely have jurisdiction to oversee what's happening there if something has gone sideways, and especially in terms of funding, and to make recommendations and to build consensus and collaborate. So one of the things I've done is I've gone through with a fine-tooth comb all of the recommendations and reports on Lucy's file that have been made available by the zoo, because as a counselor, that's what we'd have to do. So quite frankly, the following: the second report filed by the equine specialist made no mention of follow-up to any of the recommendations that were made, nor did it assess Lucy's ability to be moved in any way. And I'm deeply concerned by the failure of the zoo to provide a comprehensive follow-up report on Dr. Cracknell, the only certified actual elephant doctor, recommendations and their actions in that regard, in particular to identify suitable institutions for transfer. The last dental assessment was done in 2019 by an equine specialist, not an elephant dentist. There are a number of other issues here, but in general, I absolutely support a third-party assessment. And if that assessment says that she's able to be moved, I absolutely support moving her so that she can be put back into a sanctuary, and experience better quality of life. I'm not particularly fond of zoos in general. I prefer sanctuaries and healing centers rather than putting animals on display, no matter the reason. Second thing, coyotes. I see coyotes every day here where I live in Rossdale, of neighbors, and they do take after kids. But the U of A has an amazing program, and we need to partner with our academic people in the city, the institutions that we have access to, where they've set out groups of people, and I help support that within communities.
We're out of time.
Thank you.
The person to answer first is Candidate Wolchansky. Now, I've had quite a few comments about how progressive this group of candidates is, and people are looking for a way to differentiate you. And so I'm going to ask the standard and classic interview question. This is an uncomfortable and difficult job. Why do you want this job?
I love this question, don't you, candidates? You're absolutely a roster of incredibly passionate people who are running to be your counselor. What makes me right for the job is my range of experience, my empathy, compassion, and courage. I've already been doing the work in our communities at a grassroots level in public service. I've tried to keep my head down, try to sort of stay out of the fray of being in that limelight, because I've heard the calling of public service a long time ago, and doing the job right was good enough for me. But in seeing how the pandemic has affected our communities, in seeing how much is at risk over the next 4 years, we can't have someone who has a single background. We can't have someone who's going to find the exact same solution to every single problem. We need to have a counselor who's going to step up to do the work, who's going to build collaboration, who's going to identify when council will lead, support, get out of the way, and who's going to be able to find the right situation and the right solution to each individual problem. It's about building our community. It's about relationships. I have relationships. I have that already. I thrive in chaos. And my core value is accessible, responsive. It's going to be based in a relationship. I realize that, council is answerable to our community. And what I bring to the table, what I want to do, is to actually fundamentally change the framework so that we are encouraging new leaders, fresh ideas. Let's talk term limits. Let's talk spending limits. Let's talk fundamentally changing how we approach our power structures. Let's get to work, Edmonton. Our communities can't wait. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Wilczynski. Candidate Bruff.
My values and upbringing have been centered around advocating for our most vulnerable residents, LGBTQ2+, seniors, folks with disability, and other marginalized community members, BIPOC individuals. And I will continue to play a leadership role in advocating for our rights and our protection. As I said earlier, I decided to run for public office because of my background, my experience, my qualifications, and my ties to the community. Personally, campaigning or running for public office was not something I wanted to do, but community members over the years have reached out, asked me to consider running for office. And I remember when I spoke with my family about running for public office, and I could see the fear in my mother's eye. The fear that she had that discrimination, hate, racism was something that I would have to encounter while running as a candidate. And unfortunately, that fear is now a reality. I'm constantly receiving harassing emails, vitriolic messages. I was even called the N-word. And recently, a threat of violence. But that's not going to deter me from running to represent and serving my community. I'm running for public office because I want to contribute to making our city one of the best places to live, raise a family, invest, and retire. We can create safer communities, a thriving economy, and build an affordable and inclusive city. On October 18th, I'm hoping I can count on your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Bruff. Candidate Haley.
I'm here.
Oh, so why do you want to be city councillor? It's a difficult job.
Oh, why do I want to run city council? I have been advocating for marginalized community for so long and have been lived in Edmonton for almost 10 years. I believe there's a divide. There's no representation. There's no representation for marginalized group at City Hall. I want to have an inclusive, integrated city where all people have equal opportunities. Our voices are not represented at City Hall. There is so much poverty in Odamin, Santa McDougall, Boyle, and Macaulay. I want to be the voice of these communities, of these people, of the Edmontonians who are marginalized and who live in the margins, who don't have a voice at City Hall. I want to be the voice of these groups, community members, people who look like me, immigrants, indigenous communities who have faced centuries of racism and oppression. And I hope people will vote for me on election day. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Haley. Candidate Akbari.
Thank you. The most difficult question of the night. I think I can gladly say I do not come from a political background. I am sort of the outsider. And if it wasn't because of my neighbors convincing me and pushing me, it took me 3 months. And when I decided, I had to look at what strengths do I have and how can I best use them? And it was to be in service like my father and my grandparents were. I think one of the things, I came here as an immigrant at 19 years old. Everything I've built, I have built myself. I have lived in 8 different countries. I come with a great deal of experience in atrocities committed abroad and learned from it. I've also had the opportunity to learn how I should live my life, which is with compassion. I have broken perceptions. My wife is, born and raised here. Our daughter is mixed. And even here in my work experience, I have owned a coffee shop for 4 years. I worked in the kitchen myself because I love cooking. In the arts community, I've been on stage, on film. I run a dance company as well, and working for the military and teaching cultural sensitivity. Above all, if I had a strength that I can share and I'm good at, it's simply this, that I can bring people together. I can bring people around a table to sit together and see eye to eye. That consensus building is what I've been teaching to our troops. It's what I've been teaching for our troops to go abroad and find out what people need so we can provide them with non-government organizations and together to give them a better life. And those are the things that I can bring to here. We are a little bit divided, and a vote for me is bringing people together. Thank you, and I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Akmari. Candidate Batiste.
Thank you very much. So why do I want to be a city councillor? How am I qualified? I want to be a city councillor because I've seen the impact of the decisions, the contrary decisions that have been made over the last 8 years. And they've impacted me, my family, my businesses. I've seen the impact they've had on everyone else. And I want to be able to make change in a common sense, practical, and efficient way. So I'm a 25-year lawyer and a business entrepreneur with experience being accountable and responsible already for billion-dollar budgets across Canada and saving millions by making effective and efficient decisions. I currently advise municipalities, both councillors and their leadership teams, on how to build consensus, how to get along, to make your priorities a success, to transition between strategy and implementation. And that's key, on how to collaborate to achieve measurable success in the best interests of citizens. I've written policies, bylaws, and engaged communities for input into major developments. I also am an ethics investigator into code of conduct breaches by councillors and board members. I understand my role, responsibilities, and accountabilities very well. I've worked with all levels of government, in environment, in energy, and in other areas, and I can effectively continue to work with them to benefit Edmonton. I'm a relentless community and not-for-profit volunteer doing free legal work for nonprofit orgs, currently chairing Autism Edmonton, sitting on the board of Savita to provide affordable and subsidized housing, and incorporating and sitting on the board of a number of other organizations for vulnerable women in our society, to make systemic change in policing, and to provide training and resources to other community organizations. I am already doing what others are just talking about. I'm not just passionate because everyone is passionate. What I am is experienced and an achiever of success. I empower people and organizations to work together. Thank you.
Candidate Stevenson.
You know, so many of my career decisions are about choosing where I can have the biggest impact. So within the city, working first in community development, community plans, moving into the zoning bylaw, which may seem like an obscure area, but it has a tremendous impact on the quality of our life. And now in my work in affordable housing. What really excited me about putting myself forward for a city council in this election was the fact that I bring the knowledge of the city, how the system works, who the players are, and how to most effectively create change. I also feel that housing and homelessness is one of the biggest issues facing our city right now. And my 6 years serving on the board and as board president of Right at Home, and now as a staff member there, I bring an expertise in how we can address that issue in our community. Finally, so much of City Council's decisions is about land use and how that translates into our communities. That's my professional background and something that I'm very passionate about, building great communities with great transit. So what I'm most excited to do is make change, to chart a course out of the pandemic so that we bounce back stronger than before. And we put ourselves on a trajectory for a sustainable future, financially, environmentally, and socially. So thanks so much. My website is annstevenson.ca, where I have a lot more thoughts laid out, and I look forward to being in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Stevenson. And thank you to all of our candidates. The time is now 8:56, and in my opinion, we don't have enough time to do justice to an additional question. So we are going to wrap it up there. I thank all of you for being here tonight, for putting yourself forward for public office. This is a noble thing, and I'm hearing a real lack of cynicism, and I like that. This was a good evening, and I thank you at home for being engaged and for being interested in this election. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to the Rat Creek Press for organizing this, and I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. Good night.